Aloha ikomo mai to this Hawaiian Islands Association for Marriage and Family Therapy Lunchtime Talk Story. My name is John Souza, and I'm the president of HIAMFT. And my co-host Janet Covington and I are delighted to share this time with you and our very special guest speaker. I'm super excited to introduce you to Dr. Manijeh Daneshpour. Dr. Daneshpour is the system-wide couple and family therapy director and professor of marriage and family therapy at Alliant International University in California. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist with more than 2 decades of academic research and clinical experience. Manijeh is originally from Iran and identifies herself as a third-wave feminist. Dr. Daneshpour's main areas of research, publications, and presentations have been centered on issues of multiculturalism, social justice, postmodernism, third-wave feminism, and premarital and marital relationships. She has been a keynote presenter for HIAMFT and the National Council of Family Relations, the Minnesota Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, as well as the California Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, and many other organizations bringing the issues of social justice, ethics of care, gender and power, and multicultural competencies to the forefront of the social science field discourses. I first had the pleasure of hearing Manijeh speak in Minneapolis, Minnesota, I think back in probably 2009, maybe. It was a long time ago. So without further ado, Dr. Daneshpour, it is great to see you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you to see you, and welcome everyone. It's so great to have this connection all the way in Hawaii. It's too bad that I can't be there in person, but this for now, it's okay. At least we are connected and we are talking about important issues. What I'm going to do in the 45 minutes that I have, and I'm hoping that we use the 15 minutes to have some meaningful conversations as much as we can, and then end exactly on top of the hour. I'm going to talk about what present to you what the problems are in terms of the field of psychotherapy, and then a little bit later talk about what we need to do in terms of the ethics of care when it comes to issues related to race, class, culture, and politics, and bringing them into the therapy room. Before I begin, I am very political and unapologetically political. I've always been, as a therapist, as a teacher, as a presenter, as a supervisor, as a friend, as a family member. I think that politics are very, very important, and they define who we are and how we interact with each other and how decisions are made globally. So what I believe is that psychotherapists, we have all these psychotherapists around the globe, but the issues of psychopathology continues to increase. And psychotherapy as a whole has been very conservative in terms of perpetuating the same values and aspirations that create the need for therapy. So we basically bring people in and deal with their depression and anxiety and what's happening within the families and their workplace and all of that, and then nothing changes, and so they have to come back and seek more therapy in order to resolve many of those issues. And we are pretty much status quo. Basically, I think I had a presentation in Europe, and I was saying that we basically work for governments of different countries, because what we do is that people come to us, and we basically tell them that you need to behave, and then we send them back to society. And so that has been continuing for many, many years for us as a group. The other part of it is that what psychotherapy promotes is that we are autonomous human beings. We should go for self-fulfillment. We should have personal choices and individual achievements. And that should happen without much compromise or sacrifice. It shouldn't be one of the issues that we have seen in after COVID is people talking about freedom. Before COVID, we saw parents saying that I don't want to vaccinate my child, and no conversation about, well, it's not about your child only. There are people that are immune compromised. There are people that we eradicated so many childhood diseases, and now they're coming back, and you need to worry about others. You worry about other children in the daycare, in the school, all of that. People say it's a personal choice. I don't, this is something that I don't want to do. And you hear people now saying, don't be a sheep, don't follow directions. And so the psychotherapy hasn't been able to really do a good job talking about compromises and sacrifices that we have to make in relationship in terms of making it happen. And you actually even see that in collectivistic societies, psychotherapy hasn't been able to hold on to those collectivistic values and talk about compromises and sacrifices. The other part of it is that in this society, people don't even, it's so invisible. At the same time, it's like fish in the water that doesn't know the existential being in water, the capitalistic construction of the society. Actually, what it does, it alienates people. They lose the sense of self. This meaninglessness comes with it. There is a general disorientation. If they tell you constantly that you have personal choices, but you see that you don't, you see that because of the color of your skin, because of the neighborhood that you live in, because of lack of resources you have, you're not able to have all those choices. It ends up feeling alienated. You look at people that are making more than 5 countries GPDs together, and you feel a sense of meaninglessness when it comes to the sense of self, and this general disorientation that there must be something wrong with me, and I'm not able to take advantage of my and achieve as a person. Anyone can achieve if you can only hard enough. And that's how capitalism actually have been, capitalistic systems have been successful in telling people that it's up to you, when many people see it on a daily basis that it's not up to them. And psychotherapy hasn't done anything about that, at least within the context of therapy. The other part of it is that in a bigger picture, we lack that wider theoretical perspective, looking at critical race theory, looking at feminism in terms of third wave feminism, in terms of what happens to women in different cultures, the cultural context, what happens in our relationship with men, and understand why is it the etiology of what's happening to our clients in different places. And at the same time, it is we are basically helping people adjust to pathological, social, cultural, and economic systems. And basically, we promote these ideas routinely when people come to us. We tell them that, they tell us the stories about, well, I was treated this way. My boss, I think it doesn't like me. And we tell them that, well, you need to behave in a way that your boss, your coworkers, other people will be more understanding of you, without understanding this person's um, socio-political context, socio-cultural context. And so it's not designed to deal with social and cultural pathology. What we do, we don't talk about the cultural issues in society that impacts people. We don't talk about the social issues that impact people. The biggest issue, where do people go to school to become psychotherapists? They go to the psychotherapy schools, they go to graduate schools to become, professionals going to society and helping people. And they're not really grasping the role of class, gender, race, culture, the etiology of psychopathology. And if even they get it in a very abstract way of thinking. Even those that think that they are so woke. If you, in our program, because we have multiple campuses in different parts of California, Once a semester, we have an all-day retreat. And this year, because of the movement, Black Lives movements, and all socio-political issues that are doing, I asked faculty if they can talk about their personal process related to what's happening politically, what happens with Black Lives Matter, and what they're going to do about it. And in one after another, they had the sophisticated way of talking about their understanding. They had a good way of talking about how it's impacting them. Some people got very emotional, and they said this is really hard. At the same time, we have several students in different campuses that are Black and men, and they are having issues in different campuses. And the same people that are advocating for being understanding and in being sensitive to different people's issues, they were not sensitive to them. And when I was challenging them, and I was like, I don't know how there is a disconnect, even when people understand the impact of these issues. And so if it's not happening in our psychotherapy programs across the country, how do you want us to go out there and know how to deal with these kinds of issues? And so the field, our field, other fields need to be really challenged based on the way that we are training our graduates. And also, and instead of making social justice a top priority for us, modern psychology actually preserved injustices and inequalities. We have, when we talk about the moral aspects of what we do, when we talk about the ethics of care and how we should care for our clients, and talk about our moralistic intentions, it's our credibility as psychotherapists goes under question. People go, well, we're psychotherapists, we shouldn't get into these kinds of issues. Well, then who should become part of talking about these issues? A good example in the field of family therapy is Yvonne Bazar-Munajee, who has the whole therapy model, contextual family therapy. Is not included in the big volumes of family therapy. We don't talk about it as much because what he does in his model is talking about fairness and justice. He's not even into getting social and political issues. He says when people come to you and talk about issues, often, and I will say all the time, it's something about somebody being unfair, somebody being unjust. Have you ever had a client come to you and say, my life is perfect, everybody's treating me so well? It be your boss, your husband, your wife, your children, somebody has treated you unfairly. And so we can't even have a moralistic intentions when it comes to those kind of things. We say, oh, that's why majority of us, even as family therapists, prefer to do individual therapy, because we don't have to pick sides, because we don't have to say something that one person in the room doesn't like, even though we know that the person's behavior is wrong. So we have excluded from all of our books. I don't see faculty teaching contextual family therapy. People are uncomfortable talking about issues related to fairness, even within the context of family and couples. That when you work with couples, if one person is unfair to the other person, why not talk about that? Why not challenge them? Why not bring that up? And so if it's not happening at that level, how are we expecting psychotherapists to actually take into the issues related to social justice? So what we do though, what we are good at, is that we make everything about clients' life narrative, not including social issues, economic hardships. And basically, we are a tool for social control. I often tell my supervisees and my students that we are not an agent of social change. We are an agent of social control. We help societies just stay the same and not do anything about it. Even even when you see issues like Black Lives Matter, Me Too movement, our associations will say a little, like, you know, okay, we have to make a statement, but it's not really bold. It's not really out there. It's not really getting people to talk about those issues. When we go to conferences, the topics that are related to social justice, related to lives of minorities, that are related to unjust relations between groups, are the smallest, or at the end of the hallway of hotels. People that are attending those kinds of workshops or minorities that have suffered from the consequences of how they have been treated, they again get together and talk about how they have been treated and nod their heads, and they become angry and they become sad and they become anxious and leave the room. And who goes to Gottman's level 2 training, and who goes to Sue Johnson's, and I'm saying that in a bigger picture because these two have been doing so many workshops. Daniel Siegel, Pat Ogden, who goes to those people that actually have the power to make the change in society, can have the microphone and make a difference. And so, as I said, when political things happen, therapists are very silent instead of being supportive of clients and discussing the problems. They just say, oh, I'd rather not to talk about political issues. And so it is basically inherently therapeutic to help a person understand the injustices, and don't think that the person is crazy who's making it up, and basically reflect on the question of his own agency, and take whatever action sees fit, as opposed to coming to therapy and the therapist also agree with other oppressors in society and say, you're the one that needs to behave, you're the one that have to change, society won't change for you. So to me, social justice oriented psychotherapy, ethics of care, is all about focusing on fairness and justice, and allowing clients to basically stand up for themselves, at least within having a sense of agency, developing a sense of agency about their own things. And instead of having guilt, instead of feeling that they're odd and they shouldn't be behaving the way they do, that could become a healthy anger that gives people a sense of agency and say, I need to change my circumstances. This situation is not okay. Maybe I can get if it's a situation with the boss in the company or co-workers or something, maybe getting other people involved, maybe writing letters to different groups. Just we can be very creative if we want to help people get rid of their guilt and depression and anxiety by concentrating on what needs to happen. Let me give you two examples. William Doherty, a professor at the University of Minnesota, he was my professor when I was getting my doctorate at the University of Minnesota. He published a manifesto, I don't know how many of you have seen it, declaring Trump a unique threat to America's mental health. And more than 3,800 therapists actually signed that, including myself. Bill Doherty believed that Trump's campaign at the time was creating widespread alienation and fear among Americans and normalizing behaviors that therapists fight to reverse. I mean, that was a very much part of what he was talking about. That how are we normalizing? How is it okay to talk this way? How is it okay to behave this way? And there wouldn't be. And so he talked about the tendency to blame others in our lives, our personal fears and insecurities. He talked about a kind of hyper masculinity that is antithetical to the examined life and healthy relationships. And so he's talking about how our personal relationships have been impacted by the political power in the country. And that is very, very important. These are the people that are mainstream in the American society talking about what is happening inside of our family because of the politics outside in the country. Doherty also talks about that we should talk about politics in and outside of the therapy room, given that it shouldn't be coercive. It shouldn't be at the expense of the client. It should be, the client bringing it in. And he says we can say, I want to create a space where we see having these kinds of conversation as an option, and this is an open-ended invitation that can actually deepen therapy. So he actually gives us a sentence to use in terms of working with people. I'm sure all of you as clinicians have seen people come to the therapy room and say, hey, did you hear, they hit something on the news, something that is happening right now. You see APA did a study of how anxious Americans have never been this anxious, both sides, everybody in the country, about the political future of what's happening. And so why wouldn't we engage in this conversation in the therapy room so we can get people to talk about these things more? Another very well-known couple therapist, Terry Real, believes therapists have room to be more open and talk about political beliefs, especially in case of Trump. He made it also very specific that he says that he has been working with men for more than 30 years. And he sees men regressing again to the kind of aggressive, self-organizing behavior that he has worked so hard to change. And talks about, this is a direct quote from him, that he says, can we stand by and be neutral in the face of political movements that are adversarial to the human vision that underlies therapy? I believe that we therapists are moralists, whether we believe it or not. And so both Bill Doherty and Terry Real, as very well-known therapists in our field, are challenging the rest of us and saying, this is not about a political party. This is not about the White House. This is not about who is the president of the country. This is about our families. This is about our values. This is about what's happening and how people are learning from this model, becoming more aggressive in exhibiting the kind of behaviors that will impact all of us, all of our families. A stand-up comedian was saying that we had never had someone that we have to tell our children, don't be like him. When you have people that are in power, you want to be inspired to be like them. You want to tell your children that one day you also will be the president of the United States. And if that is something that people cannot even look up to, there are going to be issues for generations to come. So how do we talk about politics? I'm going to use politics as an example. We can talk about gender, we can talk about race, we can talk about class. First of all, you have to have a frame that set the tone through informed consent. How I do that personally, I'm originally from Iran. I'm Muslim. I wear a scarf. I basically symbolize something, even though symbolize something very different for American people. Even though the reason I wear hijab, unfortunately, is not because I'm religious, it's because I'm trying to make a political statement. And the political statement I'm trying to make is that not all professional women have to look alike. And when we think about a professional woman, there is this image of a person that comes to our mind that it's not me. I remember I was presenting at HIAMFT a few years ago, and the topic that I was going to be talking about was touch, the importance of touch in the therapy room. And I was getting ready in the room by myself. The person who was going to be checking microphones came in and said, can you please hurry up and clean the room? We have a presentation in this room. And so I started laughing and said, I'm actually the presenter. And he said, I am so sorry. I'm so embarrassed. I said, why would you be embarrassed? This is the socio-political context you live in. People who look like me actually clean the room in hotels. And so that is okay from my perspective, because you and I are both victimized by a narrative that says this is how professional people look like, and this is how a maid of a hotel looks like. And so I'm challenging that perspective. And actually, by doing that, my husband, we are both from Iran, used to be at the end of the political spectrum with everything. He tells me that by the way you look, because both of us are Middle Eastern, you're actually oppressing me, because the perception is Middle Eastern men oppress their wives or children or daughters, whatever. Because you look like this, people think that I'm telling you to look like this. You're trying to make a political statement, but no one cares. When we go to grocery store, when we go to a party, when we go out there, people see me as oppressing you. And he tells me, I hope in your presentations you talk about that you're the oppressing, the one that is oppressive and not me. But the idea is, when I go to the therapy room, when I started my journey in this field, to become a family therapist in the doctoral program, people were saying to me, people that cared about me and knew that I'm a good student, they were like, you won't be able to practice in this society. You should get your doctoral degree and go back to Iran, because then you can, you're part of that culture. Here, people don't come to you. You look different. Your name is weird. Your accent is Middle Eastern. It's going to be very difficult for you to function in this society. And so I said, well, okay, let's see if I can get a degree and do my clinical work and see what happens. And actually, who helped me to become a clinician weren't my supervisors and my professors. It were my clients that told me that you understand my pain and I will help you with mispronouncing some words and we will work together. And so I had two supervisors at the time that I started my training. One was saying, you don't owe an explanation to people who come to see you. That's a personal information. It's a self-disclosure to talk about yourself. I had another supervisor that was saying, you owe people an explanation because you look different. And I was practicing in Washington County, Minnesota. John may know a little bit more about that very white content. Perhaps they haven't seen anyone who looked like me ever before, or maybe even after. I don't know, after I left. And so I said that no, I do owe people an explanation, and I have to tell them who I am and what I'm all about before they actually seek therapy from me. So every first session for the past 25 years, I have been starting my session by talking about I'm from Iran. I wear hijab. It's a personal choice. I'll be more than happy to engage in any kind of conversations. And then I say, I always work for one session, understand your pain, and you can see that you can connect with me. We will continue. And that is, it's such a strategic move, because people then feel to continue with me, because then they don't want to be perceived as someone who didn't like someone from another culture. But that has been such a helpful process for me and for my clients, because then they actually ask political questions. They ask me why I'm doing this. They get into these conversations with me about politics and in what is happening. So there is an informed consent process when it comes to inviting people to have those conversations with me. It has been amazingly helpful. In Minnesota, I used to work with, I specialize, part of my specialty is working with men in therapy, and because gender is something that I'm very comfortable dealing with in the therapy room, and men, white men, have felt comfortable seeking help from me. And so I have used that opportunity of having informed consent with my clients to talk about many issues related to abortion, choice, gun control, why we have guns, why we shouldn't have it, what's happening in other cultures, and actually make that part of the therapy process. The other part of it is that I always focus on the relationship, and I've seen that work very well. I have seen, for example, I worked with a man for many years that owned more than 40 guns and believed that except me, all minorities shouldn't live in America, okay? Because I had a relationship with him, so he would save me, but not nobody else. And talked about how our relationship is I'm sorry, in his relationship with his family, he was severely abused by his stepdad and never felt safe. So we were able to talk about his lack of safety in life related to having these many guns and thinking that by having these many guns he can protect himself. So when we got there, he actually sobbed about the reason behind, and said, I never thought about that. I thought I'm a badass. I have this big truck. I can intimidate people. And underneath that, there is this man that has all these insecurities that he's covering by buying more guns. And of course, bringing it back to the client. I remember when September 11 happened. I just got back from Iran with my two kids. My daughter was 1 year old, and we came back. We were going to come back from New York, but we came back, I believe, through I don't remember now, Germany, and to Minneapolis. I was living in Minneapolis at the time. And that event, because I just was on the airplane, was petrified me. I mean, couldn't sleep, couldn't close my eyes, constantly thinking that I could have been in one of those flights. My kids could have been in it. Just the amount of anxiety I had about what happened, all of that, right? So it happens on Tuesday. On Thursday is my clinical day. I go to the clinic, and my a client that I've been seeing for more than a year, middle-aged man, anxiety issues, comes to the clinic and goes, in a lobby. I say hi, haven't seen him for a month because I was in Iran, and he started yelling at me in the hallway and saying, "You're going to pay for this. You went back to Iran because you had something to do with bin Laden because of what happened. Your dad is going to pay for this. Your cousin is going to pay for this. Your brothers, if you have any family members, I can see your dad sitting in his living room being decapitated by our missiles. I hope you pay. I hope your family pays." Just on and on and on, right? And says, "I'm going to call FBI on you," which, by the way, he did. And I'm going to destroy your life, all of that, right? And we continue this conversation. 40 minutes into the session, there is a little airplane, because people were donating blood. And so NPR announced that an airplane is going to be going to New York. And so don't be alarmed, because if you remember, there was no fly zone everywhere. And so both of us, my office was in the 15th floor in front of the Minneapolis airport in Bloomington. So both of us looked and like, oh no, an airplane going up. And there was a moment of both of us going, what's going on? And so I said, oh, no worries. And he said, oh yeah. So we connected, both of us at that level. And I said, both of us are victimized by a much bigger political system, that I am victimized by it and you are victimized by it. And then, so he leaves the session. As he's leaving, I say, so do I see you next week at 4 p.m.? And he goes, oh, of course, and just leaves the room. He leaves the room. My colleagues come in and they said, oh my God, we were so worried. We were going to call 911. We were going to call police. Why didn't you open the door? He was yelling at you. He told you all kinds of terrible things about you. I said, this is a therapy session. Something terrible happened in this country. And his therapist, looks like one of those people. Where else he should go? And I mean, he should gather all of his friends and families and neighbors and everyone and say, I know one of them. Let's go and just yell at this person who's supposedly responsible for this. And so to me, that's how we do therapy. That if we are the emotional container, we are the emotional container, no matter what we are dealing with. And that is one of the biggest challenges in our field, that we cannot go beyond our own pain and our own personal situation. And so if you don't remember anything from this conversation today, just please stay informed. one of the biggest issues we have cross-culturally is this issue related to not knowing what's happening around us, not having enough information, not knowing how to process information, how to understand what we should believe and we should not believe, and should process and should not process, because our clients are depending on us. I always talk about how do you, because I see people so polarized. I was just telling John before we started that I'm from Iran. We had revolution happening 40 years ago. Family members are divided on issues related to politics. We continue, president has been so polarized in terms of who likes him, who doesn't like him. Haven't seen anything like we are seeing here right now, but I do understand how these political issues impact relationships. And so, three things that I can tell you is that if you respect the opinion of family members and friends and partners, continue to challenge them and fight well. Don't go below the belt. Don't say something that is belittling, because people expect more from us as therapists. Even when we are family members, the expectation is we are professional and we can handle good communication and conflict resolution. And see if you can have a life without them. If they are part of your life, you need to continue to engage with them. And so, to me, psychotherapy should really strive toward a new relevance in a culturally sensitive way, and taking larger social problems like gender socialization, class, race, acculturation, addiction, child abuse, all of that. We have to be informed about all of those, and know that that is something we are in the process of interviewing faculty, hiring faculty, and we invited someone for a job talk. And it was a very sophisticated research on injecting psychedelics to cocaine addicts, and all the subjects were Black men. And so and people were like, wow, what a sophisticated study. And it's like, sophisticated study on the population of addicts that already have issues. What about contextual issues? What about why they get addicted? Where do they live? What kind of resources they have? Why aren't we looking at that and injecting psychedelics and saying what? And the conversation was about how successful that was. That psychedelics help addicts without taking any issues related to class and race and money and all those socioeconomics into consideration. I also think that social justice oriented psychotherapy based on ethics of care, we should be cultural and transcultural activists. We have to be activists, not just passive people who go to the therapy room and just sit there and say, I don't engage, I don't know about politics, that's not important to me. But if you can say that, that means you have the luxury, you have so many privileges that not caring, because the price of bread and the price of oil and everything that is happening in society is based on political issues. And we should stand up for the general health of larger population, as we are seeing in COVID, as we are seeing the devastations for different communities of color. We need to be talking about those kind of things. And to me, we need to develop a social ethics mentality, that we are not alone, that we are, I tell my students and my supervisors and my colleagues that we are citizens of the world. We are citizens of this country before anything else. And those, to me, psychotherapy is part of public work, and being a good citizen. And so you have to take it to that level and say, I need to be informed. I need to be providing more for my community in terms of my knowledge and level of sophistication about these issues. There is a book by Joshua Green. He's a Harvard graduate, Harvard professor, I'm sorry, called Moral Tribes. It actually gives you a very good perspective about how we develop these minds, that some of us become conservative, some of us become, some of us become this, I was telling John before we started that the conservative mind is not people in America. You see them in Europe, you see them in Iran, you see them in Africa. There is a group of people who have this one-dimensional way of thinking, and they're absolutely loyal to their cause, and they're loud, and they are dedicated, and they are passionate, and they will do anything for that ideology that they have. So he talks about rules for morality. For the sake of time, I'm not going to get so much into it, but basically he says that morality is not something that is static. It's supposed to be very dynamic. You really need to be focusing on a bigger issue. You need to understand your biased fairness, because sometimes we think we are fair, but we are very much biased actually about our perspective. And so our values and our facts and evidence should be something that we constantly renew. That's why the liberals are called snowflakes, because they say they melt with different things, but that's the way to move societies forward. And so he actually talks about giving. I've been doing a lot of presentations after COVID in about what to do. People are stressed out, people are anxious, people are depressed. Research shows that we do well, our brain functions really well when we give, when we do things for other people. And so Joshua Green in the book says we can grow something new under the sun, that it could be a global tribe that looks out for its members, not to gain advantage over others, but simply because it's good. And so if we get to a place that we can give, can keep ourselves informed, engage in these important conversations with our clients, and give back to our community as therapists, and encourage our clients actually to give back. When we sit in our therapy rooms and have people come to us and complain about family members, and we sit there and validate and nod and say, I'm so sorry you live with people like this. If we take him to have a bigger perspective and say, can you be more forgiving? It's okay to sacrifice a little bit of your meanness about and have this I thou relationship, make it about other people. And if you can give, you feel so much better. And I'm ending my talk with a post on Facebook of Heather Heyer, who was in a protest and got killed by white supremacists. The last quote on her Facebook before going to this protest was like, what she said: "If you are not outraged, you're not paying attention." I want you to repeat it in your own head. If you are not outraged, you're not paying attention. If you are not outraged, you're not paying attention. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Questions, comments, complaints? Go for it.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your views with us. I share your views, and I've been very frustrated many times talking to students who didn't want to get involved. They didn't think that was their position, and explaining to them, oh yes, it is. We're all part of this global community, and unless we speak up, we have no voice. So thank you for taking such a strong stand. You've re-energized me, encouraged me, make me feel more hopeful that there are.
That's the idea, right?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. That's the idea. We have to. I was doing a supervision check with a supervisor in Mankato, Minnesota, little town. And the supervisor was this, she has been teaching for more than 40 years. She said, I've never met her before. She said, one day in class, when all of these were happening, she said, I told my students that no one can leave classroom until each one of you come up with at least one idea that what you're going to be doing differently to engage people. in your communities. And I love the idea of just using your power in the classroom, as a white woman that has so much credibility in her community, getting students to do that. So I appreciate you doing with your students, and hopefully all of us will do that in different places.
Thank you.
Any controversial questions, challenges, like how dare you, those, I love those kind of things. John knows me, so we can, get into it.
So
John, do you want to go for it? Yeah.
Let me ask you this question.
Please.
So I can get very upset in my own being, in my own energy, when I'm talking to people that are not listening to the facts, that are having very strong opinions that make no sense to me.
Yep.
What do you do? Does that ever happen to you? And if it does, what do you do to calm yourself?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, what I have done, well, I'm like you, I'm very passionate. I get very upset. I recently told my brother-in-law, she said, he was telling us that he, just jokingly, he said, just to annoy everybody, I'm going to vote for the president, the Trump again, this time, or joking about that. I said to him that, then if you make that decision, then make a decision about our relationship as well, like kind of half jokingly, half meaning it. But then that has started a conversation, right? That is it's a luxury to joke about those kind of things. For people, it's actually their livelihood, the borders, people cannot be coming to this country. So yes, I do have the same level of anger. What I do about it is that what Bowen has taught us very well, that have a non-anxious presence and know that it's not about you. It is about the person processing. I watched a very cheesy, these Instagram media kind of a thing that my daughter sent it to me. It was an 8-year-old kid who was watching news with the family, and seeing these angry people yelling about, against people who were protesting. And this 8-year-old girl says, I just want to know what happened to these people that they are so mean to others. It has been such a revelation for me, that this 8-year-old kid is like, something must have happened in their personal lives. I gave you an example of my client with 40 guns, that he is tormented personally. Says, no one cared ever about me. Why should I care about immigrants? Why should I care about people? The only thing that I can have power is this. So just constantly telling yourself that this is not about you, something must have happened with them, and then informing them, and have the kindest face, that it's like, oh, okay, let's have this conversation, and ask you, where do you get this information, and why do you feel this way about it? I'm hoping that 9 out of 10 helps, but there are times that you just want to slam the door and say, forget it. So
Thank you.
we can do that as well.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Yes, I have some thoughts about and puzzlements about sort of a moral dilemma between the words and situation of blame versus accountability versus forgiveness. And so we see with the model of Trump, the externalization of blame all over.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to account for that.
Mm-hmm.
We want to teach people not to blame. And yet at the same time, I feel a deep moral urgency to hold people accountable. And so that dilemma, and then holding accountable in a way that maybe when the other person takes some responsibility, then there's room for forgiveness. But sometimes premature forgiveness to make one's own self feel better leaves in place the unaccounted for injustices. So these are interesting implications for us, I think, to consider all together as a matrix that we
And
face
Minuchin
all
will
the
tell,
time.
yeah, that's true. Minuchin will tell us that that is part of a jigsaw puzzle, that we have to pay attention to different aspects of it, and look at the blaming, look at accountability. There are times that the stages as systemic thinkers, instead of thinking about this first, this second, this third, we can actually think about it in terms of circular. And if I can have you to be little bit accountable, and then little bit of forgiveness, and little bit of challenging you, and say that, and then we do it again and do it again. And so the issue, I think, is that as human, it's easy for us to give up on each other pretty fast. It's like, forget you then, you know what, I only have one life. But we all have seen that when we actually believe in people's ability to change, and trying to be, and you know, the challenge comes from the best part of our heart. It actually, and when it's authentic, it actually gets people to also listen to us. So just do all of the above and repeat until you know you change that. John says a hug and a kick. Minuchin would say a hug and a kick. Exactly. Yes. So do it at the same time. Do it all the time. Just kind of see how that plays out, but don't give up. That's what we have to remember, that we cannot give up on people, on humanity. This is just a part of history that had to happen for us to become more conscious. You see a lot of people believing us when we were talking about that minorities and people from different cultures are treated badly. People were like, come on, Obama is the president, sick and tired of you guys always complaining. And they weren't getting it, that there is something so fundamental about how people generation after generation think about people of other cultures. And now he was just in Minneapolis saying that there is something about white gene. I mean, who have we had to have this conversation so blatant? And so it needed to happen in order for us to come together. I often say civil rights movement didn't happen because Black people were upset about what was happening to them. It was white people that got outraged and said no more of this. And so the power that white people hold in this country for is enormous. So you need to take that and not give up on people and continue to be the voice of voiceless.
I can jump in just for a second. Thank you.
Please.
This was so amazing and so timely. And in the vein of being the voice for voiceless or traditionally stigmatized groups, as someone who focuses on work with people with substance use disorders, right? The term addict, we now know can be stigmatizing and kind of change our views, let alone individuals' views, and impede access. So I loved that you included like the social pieces of addiction and taking it outside of the individual, and went back and forth, and I'm like, nope, gotta jump in and say it. That changing our language can be so powerful.
You're absolutely right. I cannot thank you enough, because see, this is the social consciousness that we have to all think about. That is actually, I changed some of the wording. I had patients before, and consciously changed it to clients, because then we see people as sick as opposed to people that are needing help. So absolutely, I will change that language entirely. Thank you so much, Diane. Okay. Thank you all. I hope that we continue to fight for social justice and use our therapy room, our classrooms, our living rooms to engage in important conversation. And please, please, please vote and have other people vote, pay people to vote. It's okay. It's an ethical dilemma that we will deal with it later. But we need to vote and we need to be socially active. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Manijeh, thank you so much. Mahalo from all of us here at HIAMFT and in Hawaii. And do you have anything that we can look forward to if we want to find more about you or your work or follow you?
I'm doing bunch of trainings for universities on dismantling racism. If I'm doing another workshop next week in Minnesota with Ken Hardy on the topic of race and people coming together.
Nice.
I believe it's a very good conference they put together. The Kente Circle, Larry Tucker put it together. And so it's just happening, you know, everywhere. We are talking about these issues, and any of us are equally responsible to engage in these conversations. And I have a website. You can Google me, my name, and you can see what I'm all about.
Fantastic. Manijeh, again, mahalo.
Thank you for inviting me. Have a good time. Hopefully we will visit after COVID.
I hope so.
Any of you come to California, let us know. We will host you. More than happy to host you. We're in Irvine, California.
Excellent.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
everyone for attending.
Bye-bye.
Aloha everyone. Take care.